The reality is there would never be a necessity for unions if it's not a defense of Jeff Bezos at all. Why corporate America hates unions.
And big companies will do just about anything to make sure that doesn't happen.
Starbucks workers in upstate New York who voted to unionize for the first time in the face of strong opposition from management.
The union says the deal includes pay raises of up to 66% over 2.5 years.
A historic vote in New York City. Yeah. Workers at an Amazon warehouse in Staten Island will unionize, a first in the U.S. in Amazon's 27 years.
It's a great time for unions right now. The win rate for union elections is steadily rising. Strikes are up from last year. And public support for unions is at a 57-year high. While unions only represent a relatively low 10-ish% of the workforce, it used to be around 20% in the 80s and around 30% in the 50s. All signs point to us being at the start of something big. Workers at Amazon, Apple, Chipotle, REI, Starbucks, Trader Joe's, and lots of other companies where unionization once seemed impossible have made headline after headline after headline with unprecedented union victories. And that's really exciting because unions make people's lives so much better. Unions, like the word implies, unite workers together to fight for their collective interests when their employers would rather pit them against one another. And that has massive consequences. A union worker, all else being equal, meaning same education, occupation, and experience, makes 13% more than a non-union worker. And over the course of an entire career, that works out to an extra $1.3 million on average. Union workers are more likely to have employer-sponsored health insurance, and their employer typically pays more of it. Union workers are also more likely to have paid sick leave and vacation, and more of both. More likely to have a retirement plan, and less likely to be fired. Union contracts protections that stop employers from firing people at will. And multiple studies have found that unionized workplaces are safer, they have fewer workplace accidents, and fewer fatalities. And the benefits of a union don't just go to unionized workers. If unionization goes up in your area or your industry, studies find that your wages will go up too, even if you aren't part of a union, thanks to something called the union threat effect. Basically, your employer, seeing that unionization is possible right next door, is likely trying to avoid it happening at your job by increasing your wages and/or benefits in anticipation. Everybody wins. And it's not hard to see why someone working at, let's say, Amazon might want to join a union. It's not only about the statistics. When a company feels comfortable forcing its employees to work past the point of safe evacuation in a tornado, thereby leading to the death of 6 workers, and threatening its workers to go back to work when they stop because of a warehouse fire, and generally can't tell the difference between these two things, having a union there to stand up to management isn't just a matter of improving things for the long run, it's about saving people's lives and protecting their dignity right now. Unions are great because they take the lopsided power structure of a private business. You do what you're told or you're fired. And
Billionaires should unionize. They already do. The AMPTP is like functionally a union, but most wealthy people do not need unions. They already have, their assets lined up together. And not only that, but they are significantly better organized. They are very cognizant of their own class interests, and also they've already created governments, capitalist liberal capitalist democracies, the state as a mechanism to basically churn out the fucking same results that a billionaires union would create. In a dictatorship of the proletariat, and not a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, as is a capitalist formation of society, billionaires would need a union if they wanted to defend their own class interests. Of course, they do not need that because they have the state. It's possible to unionize on a tech office job. They've had 2 rounds of massive layoffs of my work already. Yes, of course it is.
And they rebalance it. With a union there to strike when management's demands get out of hand, to protect someone from getting unjustly fired, and to get more money, benefits, and protections in everybody's contracts, your boss can't do whatever they want anymore. So, as you might expect, the surge in collective organizing has come.
You can unionize. How does REI being a co-op plan to workers unionizing? Is it useful? I don't know, but from what I understand, REI was not very happy with their workforce unionizing. But the only aspect of the only place where you can't really unionize is in the chat at the top of the hour when there's a 3-minute ad break.
come with a corresponding surge in union busting. Big business owners aren't ready to let go of all the power they've accumulated during the neoliberal era, so they're fighting back as hard as they can. But they won't admit it outright. Public support for unions is way too high and way too widespread for anti-unionism to be good PR. So guys like Jeffy B say that it's all about workers' choices.
We don't believe that we need a union to be an intermediary between us and our employees.
Okay, that's not even okay. For the record, that's not new. The "we're a family and we don't need outside intermediaries" is the oldest anti-union trick in the book. This is not a defense of Jeff Bezos at all. I'm just saying that, like, they have always said this. Bosses have always said this, even though, ironically, who the fuck do you think, who's the rank and file? You know what I mean? Who's the rank and file of unions? Like, unions are literally made of the people that you want to have a relationship with. It's so fucking stupid. It's so profoundly silly, but it works.
But of course, at the end of the day, it's always the
As
employee's
propaganda.
choice.
But actions speak louder than words, and when it comes to union busting, Bezos' words are like a whisper in a pillow. And to make that point crystal clear, the rest of this video is just going to be a catalog of all the different union busting strategies we could find, so that you can not only recognize them if they ever apply to you and your workplace, but more generally get a better idea of what employers are willing to do, both legally and illegally, to make sure your voice at their company stays suppressed. For starters, just to give you an idea of scale, US businesses spend $340 million a year on union avoidance advisors alone. In order to avoid paying their workers more, companies are ready to spend around $350 an hour, or $2,500 a day, on lawyers and consultants to come up with union-busting strategies and mine legal documents for ways to punish worker organizations. And the things they come up with can be truly disgusting. The most obvious one is firing the people they think are leading the unionization movement, like what happened at Starbucks stores here, and here, as well as many more locations across the country, amounting to at least 85 workers. Management gets a whiff of unionization, and they'll just start firing the troublemakers. And if you're thinking, that sounds like it should be illegal, it already is. The National Labor Relations Act, or NLRA, makes it illegal for employers to fire workers for trying to unionize. Just like it also makes it illegal to fire everyone at once by shutting down a branch in the process of unionizing, which Starbucks has also coincidentally done at multiple locations. But employers know that, and they don't care. When they want to shut down the union, they'll just skirt the law by finding a BS reason to shut down a store, like citing safety concerns. Or will find a BS reason to fire an employee. For example, suddenly enforcing a technical rule that's never been enforced before, like what happened to this Starbucks employee.
It began on January 25th. 2 Buffalo Starbucks locations had already voted to form a union. Another in Mesa, Arizona was in the process, and the workers were gaining steam within the company and in the press. On this Tuesday afternoon, a Starbucks district manager tried to intimidate 19-year-old Layla Dalton, a Phoenix employee, into quitting. The manager said she was suspending Layla and shutting down the store for the day. Her violation? Layla had texted her direct supervisor. According to an NLRB investigation, the manager began enforcing a previously unenforced rule prohibiting employees from communicating with supervisors by text message. Layla had texted her boss at least 12 times before this incident without any problems, but suddenly she was being suspended for it.
What companies like Starbucks do in these situations is incredibly transparent, but they couldn't care less if they get caught. At worst, the NLRA only requires that an illegally fired employee be given back pay and reinstated. There are no punitive damages or civil penalties, even if the company is found guilty. So firing a worker for trying to unionize is not only easy, it's cheap. It's why employers are charged with violating federal law in 41.5% of all union election campaigns, and why 1 out of 5 union election campaigns involves a charge that a worker was illegally fired for union activity. Breaking the law doesn't really have any consequences.
It's insane thing of union busting in the USA is fucking insane. Like, it's not a huge thing here in the UK. My sister's the chair of the young members in the RMT, and she went to Cuba on a union-funded trip and met up with a lot of other unions from all around the world. And she spoke with Chris Smalls, and everyone from the UK didn't even know that, like, the union busting videos they show were a thing. UK in some respects is better, but in others it's worse, honestly. It's give and take. I wouldn't look to the UK to say, like, they are a beacon of unionization efforts and powerful, especially when you think about, like, how much disdain the overarching population has, including corporate media in general or state media in general. They're fucking insane over there, dude. They would just like straight up. I've talked about this with Alex Press a lot, and this is something I've brought up on stream as well before. They got that deeply entrenched caste/class system as well. Yeah, they're very open about it too. They almost have a positive aspect. They almost have a positive approach to like nobility. Even it's very weird, but I'll tell you this: in the United States of America, due to capital owners having such a stranglehold on any kind of unionization efforts, due to like union funding mechanisms being shut out, with Supreme Court cases like Janus decision and the like, even in the public sector, right? There's not a lot of union activity, so the media doesn't have like the terms to communicate negatively about unions, and they usually just like cover it much more positively in comparison to the British media. The British media across the board will just like rip any kind of union activity to shreds nonstop immediately from the jump. Like they have a very openly contentious relationship with the likes of Mick Lynch, for example. They will do smear campaigns. They have a lot more experience with like with outside attacks on labor unions than the US media does, partially because the US media, due to many years of not really any kind of union activity, or like a lot of unions becoming like corporate neoliberal unions in general that simply are just another aspect of like the Democratic Party. Look no further than union leadership in Nevada, for example, for the hospitality union there, unironically advocating against Medicare for all because they wanted to make sure that they had like a genuine benefit for joining the hospitality union. Like there are many examples of this kind of thing happening all around the country. These are some of the reasons as to why the American media is not necessarily as openly anti-union as possible, or as other places like the UK.
So might as well do it and fire union leaders. Worst case scenario, they get a little money back. And that's assuming businesses even get caught. Because the NLRB, the institution in charge of enforcing these laws, is completely overwhelmed.
Or the SEIU staff working under an expired contract.
And
like
can't possibly monitor every employer's illegal union busting. Funding for the NLRB has not budged in the last 9 years, so inflation has eaten away 25% of its budget. And it's lost 39% of its staff in the last 2 decades. Businesses just aren't worried about breaking the law. And why would they be?
Or they are, in my opinion, and this is a bit of a conspiracy theory, but I thought the Howard Schultz Starbucks efforts were actually deliberate. I think that they wanted to violate the law to finally fucking put the hammer in the nail to the coffin of the NLRB by destroying the remaining labor protections that exist. And I think that that's the reason why they were like very openly violating existing labor law.
Odds are no one will do anything about it. Now, let's get back to the union busting strategies.
Because what are you going to do? You're going to take it up to the Supreme Court? Guess what they did recently? Remember the work stoppage that occurred in I think it was Colorado or Washington with the Teamsters there? Was it Teamsters? They were the truckers, right? They left their cement trucks running in the concrete company, and the Supreme Court basically decided on behalf of the capital owners in that situation, the Washington cement workers, and they decided that, yes, in that specific instance, the cement workers union was liable for the potential damage to capital, which didn't even fucking happen, for the record. The potential damage to capital that could have occurred.
Another totally illegal move companies like to pull is threatening to withhold pay raises or benefits from workers trying to unionize, which by now no one should be surprised to find out Starbucks did that too. According to an Axios report, Starbucks gave pay raises and benefits to non-union workers while withholding them from stores trying to unionize. And they even gave those same non-union employees extra perks, like more sick time, a looser dress code, and more access to tips. All that to discourage workers from unionizing, which, once again, super illegal and shitty. But there's more. Companies also have no qualms about going the extra mile and straight up spying on their employees to prevent a union from forming. This became increasingly popular during the pandemic, when employers used so-called bossware, which can screenshot the websites you visit, record employees' faces and voices, log their keystrokes, track their location, and even monitor their calls and text messages. That's for the digital side. In the case of Amazon's Whole Foods, management went so far as to use real-life heat maps to track workers' locations and predict which stores were likely to unionize. You know, that very cool, totally normal, not at all dystopian kind of stuff you love to see from your favorite family-friendly grocery store. But as shocking as these examples,
the irony is, like, people make a much larger stink about, like, some Ring doorbell camera hearing, like, something that's not woke and then potentially shutting off the power in the entire house or some shit, like, when usually that's not even a real thing, right? But it's like, this is how that surveillance capitalism actually works. This is how it works all the fucking time.
They're just the most sensational tactic that employers use. They're incredibly common, but the tragic reality is that union busting is more often than not a matter of doing perfectly legal harassing and slowly putting more and more pressure on workers until they break. To do that, companies resort to a couple strategies. The most well-known being so-called captive audience meetings. Essentially, perfectly legally, your boss can force you to attend a meeting where they will spend as much time as they want bad-mouthing the union and intimidating you into voting no to unionization. Employers can discipline or even fire people that refuse to attend these meetings, or that choose to leave early. They can schedule as many of them as they want, and at any time of the day. And all with the
employers basically in the United States of America have unlimited power in union busting. Unlimited power. And on top of that, they still have a gigantic fucking industry that is specifically working to engage in anti-union activity and union busting. There are so many law firms that do this. This is their job. This is their sole purpose.
Only constraint being that they can't do it within 24 hours of a union election. In contrast, workers trying to get a union going aren't allowed to hold meetings on company property, can't take time out of their coworkers' day, and their boss has no requirement to give them a list of the company's employees, so they can't even easily contact everyone. Unions are at a massive disadvantage. And if you're thinking, so what? You probably don't know what these captive meetings can look like.
The meetings have gotten increasingly anti-union. In the beginning, it was kind of like, let's talk about what makes you love Starbucks. And then it got more and more, the union will control you, which is something that's actually in one of their slides. And they were implying it was going to be like a Crucible or Salem witch trial of like everybody putting each other on trial.
They really stopped just a sentence short of basically saying, hey, if you join this union, there's a chance that you could go to jail. I mean, we know that these are lies. And we've got partners who are 17 and 18 years old. If you're telling me that wasn't meant to scare people into thinking that, you know, this is something they could potentially be tried in a court of law for, I don't know what else the purpose of that would have served.
That kind of intimidation is terrible, and it's not just happening in meetings. Companies intimidate their workers and beat them over the head with propaganda during every waking moment and by any means available in the run-up to a union election. As a worker trying to form a union at Boeing described it back in 2017, a normal day consists of, you go to work, you'll hear something anti-union at your morning meeting, there will be some literature handed out, so when you take your breaks in the break area, they've got the TVs running and they play anti-union commercials throughout the day. And you top that off when you get home. You've got the anti-union commercials, radio and TV. And then you check your mailbox and you've got anti-union literature in your mailbox. And just so you know what to expect if this ever happens to you, anti-union messaging almost always relies on the same arguments. A good chunk of them are baseless appeals to emotion. For example, your boss might say that a union will ruin the family vibe at work. Or lie and tell you that the union will ask you to engage in acts of violence, or that come strike time, a union won't support you like they promised they will. It's all unfounded, but it's repeated over and over and over, and it's not really designed to have you hating the union so much as it is trying to plant a seed of doubt in your mind that can make sticking with the status quo feel like the safer option, and going with the union seem like a risk. But if that doesn't work, anti-union rhetoric will either be straight-up intimidation, like the way Starbucks implies legal repercussions, or more quote-unquote pragmatic arguments. Inevitably, any union effort getting close to the finish line will be hit with a "what about union dues" display, like this poster at Delta, or this display at Boeing, where managers prominently arranged a pile of goods in the break room to convince their workers that union dues are too expensive. But like we've already mentioned, unions raise wages.
Yeah, the most typical anti-union narrative is like, bro, why would you spend it on a union dues when you can buy a PS3 or a PS4 or a PS5 or still a PS5, but you can't really find a PS5 anymore. You know what I mean?
Even assuming you make minimum wage.
You're laughing at the PS3 because that's like the most common meme. Like that's an old ass meme.
Totally average 13% increase equals $2,000 more extra at the end of the year in salary raises alone. Not to mention the odds that your benefits go up too. Union dues at Starbucks, just as an example, are at most around $550 a year. So unionizing, in a totally run-of-the-mill hypothetical, is a roughly $1,500 profit. Not to mention the fact that without a union, your boss could always lower your salary at any time or refuse to give you a raise while inflation keeps eating away at the value of your pay. And look,
the reality is there would never be a necessity for unions if capital owners truly, out of the kindness of their hearts, decided to give you the benefits in pay. Okay. Except and engage in a fair distribution of profits on their own. Except, once again, like I said, it's supposed to be magnanimous to do that. Except it's what's fair. It's what's right. Okay? The point in that circumstance is that it shouldn't require kindness to do that, right? It's never going to happen. That's not going to happen. You have to have some mechanism enforcing that relationship, because you just don't have that. You do not have that at all. It's not going to happen. Never going to happen. You need leverage. Exactly.
13
of this video, and I still have many union busting strategies I couldn't even cover. A good 10 in this table alone are not only well-known union busting strategies, they're all completely legal. I can't even mention every union busting strategy in this video because employers just have every weapon they could ever want to shut down a budding union. And that even includes actual weapons. It's not uncommon for companies to call the cops on strikers to intimidate and in some cases even attack them. That is how policing began in this country after all. For context, just try to imagine
I thought that was John Fetterman for a second.
Workers calling the cops on their boss. Workers just don't have that option. Management has every single union busting strategy they could ever want available to them, even the illegal ones. But even if they all fail, even if employers really throw everything at the wall and nothing sticks and the union vote is successful, management still has a trick up their sleeve. They wait you out. Once the union wins, all companies have to do to stay on top is not sign a contract. Because if a year goes by after a union election without a contract being signed between the union and the company can start trying to get the union decertified and then it's back to square one. It is an understatement to say that the system is rigged against workers. The truth is that it couldn't be more inhospitable to labor organizing. I mean, even the self-proclaimed most pro-labor president in American history is a goddamn strikebreaker. Power is not on the workers' side. And that's why it's so encouraging to see how successful workers' movements are at the moment. The deck is stacked so heavily against workers, and yet the public is on their side and they're winning. Battle after battle. We're seeing people, for the first time in a while, collectively beating the odds, learning from their experience, and using that knowledge to help one another have a better life. The ball is already rolling. So if you watched this video and you'd like to try to unionize your workplace, there has never been a better time in recent history to do it. To help, I've put links to the IWW's website in the description. Not only does the IWW have plenty of resources for you to read, you can use their site to get in touch with experts who can help you unionize your workplace, fight back against the dirty tricks your employer will use, and win. And if you're not employed, or if your job is already unionized, you can still help others with this process by handing out pamphlets or other information in the stores you visit. Just be subtle about it. You don't want to get the employees in trouble. People always ask every week about what they can do to help. How we as individual workers can make a difference. Unionization, even just educating yourself and your coworkers about building labor power, is one of the most critical ways we can fight back against an oppressive capitalist system. We're at the very beginning of a new labor movement, and we need everyone to get involved, fight back, and build a better future for all of us.